Hey everybody, I'm Aslan Hajivandi, joined by Jeff Cameron, host of the Jeff Cameron Show. Also some great programming here on our YouTube channel that he's involved with all the time, as well as a Sunday Smash. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can be notified and alerted whenever the live shows with Jeff and Tom and everybody at Warchant.com starts up. It's totally free. Lower right corner, hit the bell, but also hit that thumbs up. Jeff, we come bringing good news, great news, dare I say, shocking news maybe in some corners of Florida State fandom as Jared Verse has gone ahead and taken to social media to announce that he does intend to return to Florida State for this upcoming 2023 season. I don't know, for you, maybe shock feels too strong of an adjective. For me, it's right about there, man. What's your sort of takeaway, your reaction to Jared's news that he does plan to play for Florida State for at least one more season?
Yeah, well, it's luckily Aslan, and it's good to be with you, buddy. It's part of a trend of Florida State players that have all decided to come back. Obviously, not everybody did, but for the most part, guys that you needed to come back or guys that you certainly hoped would come back, they have. And again, player and roster retention has been through the roof for Florida State, basically since the final game of the season to where we are now. And you got to give credit where credit's due. The Battle's End has done a good job with this, clearly. They've emphasized it. And then I think the players themselves love playing here. And that's a testament to Mike Norvell and this coaching staff and the kind of season they just had. And really, the climb has resulted in a good record for Florida State, high expectations, and a bunch of kids who love to play for the Noles. So he joins a long list now. You're right. It is somewhat surprising because when you heard about the potential of him being drafted in the first round, Jared Verse, you can see his numbers there and his grades and how good he's been on a weekly basis at Florida State. There was room for improvement. And of course, he did play much of this year injured, but you still feel like any time a player's name is being kicked around in the first round or early second of the draft, that the likelihood you get him back is not very good. Except I do think things are changing. If you have the right kid at the right time in the NIL era, and he's stands to make a good bit of money, I do believe, Aslan, then maybe it does work. This is a kid that has said openly that he cares about his education. His parents care deeply about things beyond football as well. And I do think he has room to improve. So I think it all came together for him and for Florida State and his decision to come back.
For me, Jeff, it seemed like, the opportunity for him to come back and become like a high-end top 10 sort of first-round pick totally did exist, but like that was a much more difficult sort of bar to attain or goal to attain, and the risk of coming back and maybe slipping seemed far greater. But I don't know, maybe the fact that he wasn't at 100%, and we did see the way he was able to play, kind of makes him believe that if he strings together 12 full games and can stay close to 100%, that top 10 draft pick is probably something attainable for him, right?
I think it is. It's also a really deep year for defensive ends this upcoming draft, Aslan. And so there are guys in front of him that have more tape and have put together a longer college career for NFL scouts and GMs to take a look at. And we know this about GMs in the NFL. I mean, they make their living assessing football players and drafting players. And if those draft picks do not work out, they lose their job. It's as simple as that. And they're risk averse. So they're trying to find guys that they have an abundance of tape on who have done it at the highest level for the longest period of time, because it may not work out in the NFL. Even still, at least they could fall back on the evidence that they had and why they made the pick. If you take a risk on a guy who doesn't have a lot of tape, but you believe his upside is high and it doesn't work out, you are blamed and you are shown the door. So I think he would have been behind 4 or 5 defensive ends. And depending on when those guys are slotted, you could easily fall to the middle of the second round, maybe even late second round. Not saying that he would have, we don't know. And now it doesn't look like we'll ever know, at least not for this draft. But I do think there was that possibility that if ends began to fall, and he was slotted as the 5th or 6th most reliable end coming out, he could have easily been mid to late second.
Before we talk about real quickly about just what this means for Florida State in 2023, I mean, you touched upon NIL culture, how this is creating kind of an environment that kids want to return to. I mean, it feels amazing. It feels incredible to talk about that at Florida State at this point, considering where they'd been the previous 3, 4, 5 seasons. How special is it right now, what is happening at Florida State, where they do have both of these sort of alignments coming together, whether it's NIL or the coach kind of setting forth a positive vision that these guys are buying into?
Yeah, enjoy it, everybody. It doesn't last. As you meet with success and expectations get greater, and the pressure is ratcheted up, it tends to weigh on folks. And sustaining excellence as opposed to rising to try to meet it and achieve it are two very different things. It's hard to sustain. I think when people are hungry and you get the right guy and he creates the right culture and kids buy in and then they see some success, it's easy for everybody to jump along and go along for the ride, right? Because you're having, in that moment, very tangible evidence that what you're believing in is working. At some point, everybody begins to, unfortunately, down the line, depending on how long and how much success you have, begins to look out for themselves, and the competition becomes so heated that it's really difficult to everybody to buy in and pull in the same direction. Now, the great ones find a way to make it happen, and that's why they're lauded as such. We don't know if 10 years from now we're going to be having that conversation about Mike Norvell, but we do know right now that guy has pushed the right buttons, and these kids do believe in it, and it is a fun time to be involved with Florida State football, clearly, both as a player, but obviously as a fan. I think this coaching staff's been pretty happy with each other as well. Everybody seems to be on the same page. So to your point, enjoy this. Let it sink in. Let it wash over you a little bit, because the climb sometimes can be more fun than trying to stay atop and sustain it year in and year out.
Yeah, if we've seen this offense statistically and with our own eyes be elite, their quarterback returns, with Jared Verse coming back now and maybe seeing what the gold standard had been in the ACC and Clemson maybe looking a little bit more vulnerable. Does Jared's return, how does that affect some of the goals we have as we sit here in January and talk about the season? We know things are going to obviously fluctuate throughout the offseason, but as we sit here like in early January, you see what Clemson was, you saw what Florida State ended the season. Yeah. Jared's coming back. Does that affect conference championship goals and likelihood, playoff berth possibility? How do you process sort of his return and what it means for Florida State this coming season?
I just don't know how it couldn't impact that. I mean, if you lost a guy that was potentially a first or second round draft pick in the NFL off the edge after just one season before he ever fully realized his talents, you'd be disappointed, and it would be a setback. Even if you thought you had good players coming down the pike, they weren't a proven commodity like Jared Verse is, and Jared Verse only figures to get better. Remember, and you know this, Aslan, but he's only played a couple of years of football, and one of those was at a lower level at Albany. So he's now had a taste of big-time college football, but he stands to only get better. We know his work ethic. We know how much he cares. We know his attention to detail. We know his attitude towards off-season workouts. That guy's going to come back bigger and stronger, and one would think even faster and a little bit more, I think, suave when it comes to the process and what a game is like and the expectations and pressures of those games. This is a guy who's going to be a little bit more attuned to the week-to-week Power 5 football level, because he only had this season, and like we said, much of it was at least injury-riddled, right? So now, knock on wood, he stays healthy. I don't know how it couldn't affect the way that you view the outlook of Florida State football next year. Frankly, they're better with Jared Verse than without. It's that simple. And they may be a lot better depending on how much he improves and the additions they've already had through the transfer portal on the defensive line, which might in turn free him up and certainly provide depth and quality depth at that. So, yeah, I think that the expectation of the Florida State fan base, but also the players, beyond what we want as fans or media or whatever that might be, clearly these guys believe that they're going to come back and win something. They're not coming back just to have another good season and not win a conference championship and not make a run at the playoffs. Some people might think that that is overly simplistic, but truthfully, guys aren't coming back just for the health of it. They're coming back because they like it here and they want to make a run and they think they're close. And I don't think they're wrong. I think that the goal should be to win the ACC.
Fabian Lovett, Daryl Jackson in the middle, Verse coming off one side, they'll Patrick Payton on the other. Like we talk about the back end a lot, Jeff, but the trenches are still pretty important. They're pretty well set there now, right?
And they protect your back end, because if you have a group that stops the run and gets pressure on the passer, it changes everything about what that back end can be. So as that improves, obviously we'll see the improvement in the secondary. They're also making changes in the secondary and the coaching staff. So I believe all of that is a positive, frankly. And I think they're pretty well set in the trenches. I don't know that you ever have enough bodies when we're talking about big-time college football on the offensive and defensive line. Seems to me that when you find these teams like Georgia that are consistently good, or in the last decade plus, Alabama, they just roll guy after guy after guy out there. They suffer injuries or there's a massive exodus because of the draft. And the next thing you know, you're looking at the roster going, what do you mean they have 3 and 4 5-star interior defensive linemen coming back? How's that possible? So stockpiling that kind of talent in the trenches is of vital importance. And while Florida State has upgraded immensely, they're probably not at a national championship level yet. I say bring it on. Continue to add those kinds of players, because that is a place where a lot of people get dinged and a lot of people get hurt and a lot of people get lost for the season. We saw it with the offensive line this year. And and I know, Aslan, had they not gone out and got the quality depth that they did to protect themselves from injury, this season would not have been possible. So again, every time you hear of a defensive or offensive lineman coming in or returning like Jared Verse is, you have to celebrate it, because you need that quality depth.
Yeah. Wasn't long ago we were lamenting other guys returning to their school, passing up NFL fortunes, and now how quickly the turntables, as Michael Scott once said on a famous show. Do check out warchant.com. Plenty of reaction to the news of Jared Verse returning to Florida State in 2023, including a column from our own Corey Clark. In the meantime, check everything out here on our YouTube channel and the Jeff Cameron Show, 1 to 3 o'clock live here on YouTube, as well as 93.3 FM terrestrial radio here in Tallahassee. Jeff, man, we appreciate the insight and the knowledge as always, man.
Yeah, good to be with you, Aslan. Always appreciate it, brother. Be good.
Hit the thumbs up, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good one.